After Origin gets transferred to a school that's full of hopeless meatheads, he reunites with his childhood friend. Due to some luck, Origin summons a warrior that makes him strong, and now he's the talk of the school. Origin goes through different encounters, but soon realizes that there's more to the summoned warrior than he knows. You'd expect this kind of anime to start off with a really cool fighting scene, and not the MC introducing himself in the mirror and practicing pickup lines. Origin heads to a school that looks like it is run by the greatest delinquents around town. The teacher introduces him to the class, and he hopes to meet a cute girl there but is greeted by the guys that could kill him any second. Luckily, he spots the only girl in the class who introduces herself as Mahoro. Origin falls in love immediately and starts daydreaming about a marriage. Mahoro offers that they walk home together after school, and he rushes at the opportunity and even forgets his guitar. Some guys in the class stop him, but he later runs into a bigger dude who just finished beating up someone downstairs. The guy introduces himself as Matakara, and he is Tomoshabi's childhood friend. Tomoshabi gives him a cold shoulder because he's too preoccupied with walking home with Mahoro. At least act like you have a bit of pride and self-respect. He doesn't find the girl and ends up walking back to help at the restaurant where he also lives. Meanwhile, the dude that Matakara beat up went to report back to his boss, who's known as Marito. The lackey got pulverized by Marito, who's enjoying a sandwich as well. Origin has lunch with Mahoro the next day, and I'm surprised he has gotten that far already. She asks him if he's free during the weekend, and that's when Matakara suddenly calls out to him. Origin just ignores the dude, like he wasn't there. Later, Origin gets lured by some classmates into an arcade where they allow him to win a game. He then gets surrounded by some dudes from another school, and they start chasing him in his briefs. Origin runs into some sort of shrine and picks up a gun to threaten them with. He shoots, and the bullet bounces around the room and eventually hits in the head. Who is this guy, and why did I think he had good luck on his side? He fiddles with the item that got lodged in his head, and it summons a genie named Senya. The genie asks him to make a wish, and this retard says he wants to lose his pureness. Just how much of a loser is this guy? Senya just follows Origin everywhere, and it seems other people can't see the genie. Origin gets ready for his date with Mahoro and leaves. Senya tries to be the perfect wingman, but just ends up making Origin look like a psychopath who talks to himself. After a sudden visit to the toilet, Origin gives Mahoro a gift that she obviously despises. Suddenly, they get surrounded by members of the Sigma Squad, and Marito shows himself. The dude says he's their leader, and also Mahoro's older brother. Might as well roll the credits now because our precious MC is as good as dead. Origin is getting whooped, and this seems to be a kink for Mahoro. Poor guy. He suddenly blurts out his wish, and Senya merges with him. Origin then gives Marito a punch that sends him flying away. Well, things definitely took a sudden turn. Let's see how it all unfolds. Matakara rushes to save his friend but sees his display of power and says it's just like an honky person. The honky people were said to be those who discarded their swords and helmets during the samurai era to ascend to the top. So basically, they're just crazy guys who fight with their fists. Unfortunately for Origin, the fight wasn't over, and Marito blew him away into a pool of water. After that, Marito decided he was going to recruit Origin into Sigma. Matakara saves Origin from the pool and takes him back to his place. When he wakes up, he asks about Mahoro before dressing up and leaving. Matakara felt bad and asked if Origin avoided him because he was weak, but he said it was too long ago for him to remember. This guy really is just a jerk. Origin gets home to shower, and Senya starts talking weirdly about merging with him to release full power. I have no idea what was up with that scene, and it only got worse when Origin's mom suddenly barged in. One of Marito's lackeys, Bucchigiri, meets him to question if he's actually going to recruit someone from Minato. Isn't that the name of the yellow flash of the leaf, by the way? Origin gets to school the next day and sees that he's popular with all the guys now. At the same time, he sees Marito sprinting towards him. Meanwhile, Zabu is acting frustrated that Matakara wants to invite Origin to join Minato. Marito goes to Origin's school to look for him, and Matakara doesn't seem too happy about that. Mahoro is having her lunch on the roof when Origin comes to meet her. The girl couldn't be bothered by his presence, and even left after breaking the precious gift he gave her. Crushed my man's heart to smithereens. Bucchigiri comes to their school the next day to meet Origin, and Matakara is in the middle of asking him to join Minato. The two guys decide to fight over it while Origin just stays there whimpering. Senya tries to drag the scaredy cat to the fight, but he suddenly needs a toilet break. Quite the convenient timing. Bucchigiri and Matakara go at it with some really good fighting moves, but the Minato kid emerges victorious. That was when Origin finally decided to show up and caught Matakara as he fainted. They then went to meet the leader of Minato's squad, Ken, after Origin found out he was competing for the top with Mahoro. They get there, and this nutjob challenges Ken to a fight. He blurts out his crazy wish again to merge with Senya, and he one-shots Ken, or so he thinks. While Origin argued with Senya, Ken came and sent him to the stars to repay that punch. Luckily, Ken was quite happy, and I guess he approved of Origin. Things take a great turn when Mahoro bursts through the window to ask Origin to join Sigma. The foolish boy agrees because of Mahoro, but at the same time, Matakara steps in to tell him that Ken has approved of him joining Minato. He was just a few seconds late, sadly. Mahoro snags Origin away before Matakara has any chance to talk to him. When Origin gets to the Sigma base, he gets a lecture on their history and how they're fighting to be the top at their school. Origin couldn't care less, and just fantasized about when next he would see Mahoro. Pretty sure he won't last in this squad long enough. Mahoro shows up to take him to his welcoming party, which I'm very sure this numbskull misinterpreted. Bucchigiri just keeps glaring at him and warning him since he's so jealous that his leader has a new favorite. On their way, they bump into some guys from a group called NG Boys. They were the same ones that chased Origin around the city in his briefs, and now they're bullying some guys to get money from them. Their leader is a dude named Shindo, who got exiled from Minato. They attack Mahoro, who just pulls out some sweet Bruce Lee moves to deal with them swiftly. Meanwhile, Matakara tries to confront Mahoro, but she ignores him, and later lets out some sort of supersonic scream so he can let go of her. The only girl in this show, and she's just some sort of maniac. Origin arrives at his welcoming party, and there are definitely no girls. Mahoro tells them to start their normal welcoming routine where everyone picks a partner and they play rock, paper, scissors. The loser gets punched like a practice dummy, and they continue till there's a winner. After some time, Origin gets challenged by a guy named Auta. Senya keeps Origin's head in place when Auta punches him. This makes Origin the winner, and I was pretty sure Senya wanted this guy dead. He won again against Bucchigiri by a meager fluke, and Mahoro was the last one left. You'd think it was planned out. The way Origin had to take a toilet break again. He gets in and sees Auta beaten up, and there is a Minato armband at the scene. Someone was trying to set them up. Mahoro is at Origin's family restaurant, and his mom completely has the wrong thoughts about the situation. He tells her that he's thinking of quitting Sigma, and she slaps some sense into him. Origin is convinced that he has to succeed Mahoro, but he doesn't know the crazy girl is obsessed with her brother and wants him all to herself. Just how exactly was she even raised? He gets to his room and starts practicing to improve, merging with Cyan while the genie stares weirdly at the mark on his butt. That same night, Bucchigiri gets into a scuffle with some Minato guys, and when he leaves, the NG boys come along to finish them up. It's always the weak ones that sneak around causing havoc. Some Minato and Sigma boys get into a fight, and this eventually makes Mahoro confront Ken. Hopefully, these guys figure out what exactly is going on. After a serious argument, Mahoro tells Ken to bring the guys who ambushed his men to the Colosseum. If they can't do it within the time limit, it would mean war. Origin, on the other hand, definitely couldn't read the situation and walked into the Sigma base with too much joy. He gets dragged away by Tatsuo, who briefs him on the situation. Hopefully, he doesn't get his head chopped off early on. Meanwhile, Matakara is with Zabu and Komao, who can't wait to start the war. Is every guy here just a typical numbskull? They then reminisce a bit about Matakara's brother, Mitsukuni, who was the 42nd leader of Minato. When Kamao asks Zabu where his armband is, he lies that some crows stole it. Then he remembers how he got beat up by Shindo, who took the armband. On his way home, Origin fantasizes about how he will end up with Mahoro, regardless of who wins the war between Sigma and Minato. I'm surprised Senya is still keeping up with this fool. He gets to the restaurant and meets Matakara there. Matakara tries to persuade him to tell Mahoro to stop the fight, but Origin kicks him out when he starts talking about honky people. The next day, Origin interrupts Mahoro's lunch by joining her, and you can see how his presence could make her throw up. Matakara then calls Mahoro out and takes Origin's love away from him. He tells her to try and get Mahoro to stop the war, or get Origin to stop him, since he feels the two squads might end up killing each other. Arajin, who was watching them, read the situation wrongly and nearly died from heartbreak. Mahoro then went and convinced the foolish, useless Arajin to stop Marito with little to no effort. He got there and ended up just eating a sandwich with Marito. The two squads got ready and headed out to settle things. Then Zabu came and confessed to Matakara about how Shindo set the whole thing up. Something he would have said years ago. I hate this guy. Meanwhile, Arajin gets into a fight with Shindo, who suddenly gets up from his power punch. Senya then noticed the presence of another honky named Ichiya. Matakara goes to the NG boys' hideout to confront Shindo. Then he sees Arajin in his briefs, acting very weirdly. Just what did they do to him already? Matakara and Shindo get into a fight, but Shindo wins.
Merged with Ichiya.
Arajin then comes to see Matakara, who is tied up in a room, and for some reason, this boy still doesn't have clothes on. He then explains how Shindo took him to some kind of club with girls, and he ended up with just his briefs. That definitely doesn't make any sense. Arajin then left with Shindo, and he abandoned his friend who believed in him so much. Shindo introduces Arajin to his goons as AJ, and asks him to join them. That's all the top squads trying to get him to join them now. He's on a streak. Of course, he agrees, because of the few girls there who entertained him earlier. The NG boys leave for the fight venue and leave Matakara behind.
My heart!
On their way, Shindo asks Arajin to join his squad and tempts him with the girls there. Arajin's mind goes wild at the thought, but he ends up conflicted between them and Mahoro. Shindo then tells him how his grudge with Ken and Minato started. He attempted to use a weapon during a duel which inevitably made him the loser. He then swore to bring Ken to his knees. The problem is that with this guy, you don't know what he means when he says he wants to bring someone to their knees. The mood is slowly setting in as Ken and Marito are about to lead their boys into battle. Mahoro is scared her brother would get snapped in half, and Zabu leaves to search for Matakara. He finds Matakara and frees him. Then the two of them rush to find Shindo before things get bloody. As Shindo talks about making Mahoro a trophy girl, Arajin suddenly gets a flow of energy and punches Shindo's lights out before running out for his toilet break once again. It's probably the mark on his butt that's causing his bowels to sway like the seven seas. The war kicks off, and Matakara makes it in time to stop them and explain the situation. Meanwhile, the NG boys are chasing Arajin like he's the hottest thing in town. All this, unfortunately, means nothing to Ken and Marito, who begin fighting regardless. The war starts because of the two leaders, and while Matakara looks pained, Senya is having a blast because the fight has started. Uta then remembers how Ken and Marito's rivalry started. Ken was looking for a worthy opponent after defeating the leader of the Ikki Union, while Marito was just looking for someone to entertain him. Basically, the two of them have some screws loose in their heads. Arajin tries to stop them, but the two leaders end up knocking each other out. That's when NG boys decide to finish up the work. Meanwhile, Mahoro said she was through with Arajin, and my boy had no other reason to keep living. Senya tried to convince him to join the battle, but Arajin couldn't care less. Shindo then attacks him and tells him to merge with Senya before he dies, but the dude already gave up on life. The girl isn't even all that for him to be acting like this. Shindo goes on to beat up everyone as he confesses that he set up the whole fight. It was when Mahoro stood up to him and nearly got her life ended that Arajin decided to step in. He couldn't even step in to save Matakara. So much for childhood friends. As Arajin took a beating from Shindo, his merge rate with Senya was going up. He eventually knocked out the four-eyed punk after the merge rate got really high and saved the day. He rushed to see how Mahoro was doing, but the boys just surrounded him and wanted to pick a fight with him next. Ken and Marito recovered from their unconsciousness, while Arajin helped Matakara stand up, and they left. Arajin got back home, looking all beat up, but his mom thought it was something to be joyous about. Senya told Arajin that he was proud of him while he washed up. Arajin asked how Shindo knew about him, but Senya just gave a lame answer. In school the next day, Origin is walking to class like he's the next best thing since sliced bread, and that's when Komao surprises him. Matakara comes in and tells him that Mahoro is looking after her brother in the hospital. Origin dodges Matakara like it was a Matrix movie and sprints straight for the hospital. Origin buys flowers on their way to the hospital, and Matakara tells him how Mitsukuni went to juvie. A cop was forcing his guys to sell drugs, so Mitsukuni beat up the officer. Luckily, Origin got into the ward just in time before Mahoro fed Marito whatever concoction she cooked up. It even looked like there was something still alive inside it. She gets sent out by her brother, and that must have really stung. Marito then suggests they all go on a group date, but Origin wasn't happy that the Manito guys were coming along. Tatsuo fantasized with him about the girls in swimsuits and mentioned that they might get to see something better. Meanwhile, Origin was checking out himself and thought he was ripped. His mother stepped in and reminded him of how his muscles looked like little preserved eggs. Must be hard when it's your own family putting you down. By the time he got to the beach, he realized the group date was nothing more than a wrestling match between the two groups. Even I was fooled by this turn of events. It didn't help that Mahoro showed up in an outfit that only revealed her eyes.
I'm way too high!
Origin got a small revival when he went to get food for Mahoro. He met Shindo there, who was being used as a waiter. He asked him how he heard of Senya, but Shindo told him to ask Senya himself. The fight went on to the last round, and it was Origin and Matakara versus Marito and Jabashiri. Of course, Senya abandoned Origin in his time of need, and you knew this MC was about to die. The fight started with Matakara against Jabashi. But as soon as Origin saw Mahoro in the crowd, he tagged in to show off. Unfortunately for him, Marito tagged in as well, and this useless piece of garbage just tagged back out and left. Matakara was getting beat up, and Origin decided to distract Marito during his final move. This didn't turn out well for him as Marito began whooping him around the whole place. By some kind of silly luck, Origin and Matakara won the match. They all walked back home as Shindo and Ichiya watched them from the shadows. What could this guy be planning this time? Mahoro's lunchtime is interrupted once again by this useless honky-possessed runt. I also have no idea why she had those crazy pictures of her brother on her phone. She immediately leaves as Origin tries to ask her out, and Matakara shows up. He asks Origin for permission to use his family restaurant as a venue for Mitsukuni's welcome home party. Senya is excited about meeting the guy and asks Origin to merge with him. When Origin asks him why, he says he wants to make a happy family together. Do you see why I said that these honky people have screws loose in their heads? Matakara sees Shindo getting beat up by some NG boys and stops them. Shindo thanks him and apologizes for the situation he caused earlier. He mentioned how he always wanted to be an honky person like Matakara and Origin. He then teased Matakara, saying that there was some kind of secret in the shrine but didn't say anything more before leaving. Seems it was all a fluke to plan his revenge against Ken. Everyone in this show has some crazy obsession with fighting. Matakara got back to the restaurant and started setting up with Origin's help. When Origin's mom heard Mitsukuni's age, you could see there were different degrees of wrong going on with this woman. The day comes, and everyone arrives at the restaurant as they wait for Matakara to show up with his brother. But he doesn't. While Origin tries his luck with Mahoro again, Zabu calls him out and tells him that Mitsukuni got stabbed while trying to separate a fight in juvie. He asks Origin if he knows where Matakara could be since he hasn't been home since, but Origin just acts like a jerk as usual. Here I thought this dude had finally developed some brain cells. Meanwhile, Matakara was sulking somewhere outside when some shadowy figures started chasing him. He ran to the restaurant and went to Origin's room, but he was already asleep. He sees the knob on the side of Origin's head and turns it, which summons Senya. Matakara runs out scared like some 5-year-old kid at the sight of the genie. Shindo meets up with him and starts saying how Origin's strength is all fake and how he's not a true honky person. This messes with Matakara's head, and he runs away. Origin went out and met him at the shrine. He finally confessed about being a useless weakling and how he's using Senya's powers to be strong. Origin avoided Matakara all this while because he felt he wasn't who his friend thought he was. It's still not an excuse for him not to have a brain cell. Origin tells him that he's not trying to be an honky person again and leaves. Shindo meets Matakara in the shrine, shaking like someone with withdrawal symptoms. He tricks Matakara into shooting a gun, and the same knob on Arajin's forehead appears on his chest when he wakes up. He turns it, and Ichiya is summoned before him. It seems Ichiya betrayed Shindo and transferred to Matakara. Now Shindo is nothing but a speck of dust in the grand scheme of things. Arajin is bugging Mahoro again, and at this point, I've gotten sick of it. Zabu and Kamau go to Matakara's place to check on him, but they see him packing up some money and leaving in a hurry. Arajin, on the other hand, is on his way to Matakara's place to take a bath since the one at his place got busted. They bump into each other, but Matakara just leaves. Meanwhile, Shindo is a shadow of his former self, as the NG boys are now handling themselves, and would kill him if he came close. At the bathhouse, Arajin and the rest are worried about Matakara. Mirato gets the news about Mitsukuni, and also just finds out that Matakara is his younger brother. Everyone is worried about this guy, but the one he calls his childhood friend is acting like an animal that should be flogged. Matakara heads back to the shrine and makes Ichiya appear. The genie offers to help him defeat the darkness that has been haunting him and says he has to defeat Arajin to overcome it. Later on, Mahoro confronts Arajin about Matakara, but the fool thinks it's the right time to give her a gift. She tells him never to talk to her again until he has spoken with Matakara. Serves him right. On his way home, Shindo appears and drops off a letter in his pocket while looking like some hobo who has a drug addiction problem. Arajin was going to the bathhouse again, and that's when Senya told him how he and Matakara reminded him of Ichiya and himself. The two genies trained together when they were human to become honky people, and it was even Ichiya that gave Senya his name.
Life without him.
Matakara suddenly shows up and starts attacking Arajin, slapping the boy around the place like some hung-out laundry. Senya merges with Arajin to give him a better chance, but as usual, his toilet time comes up.
No!
Are his bowels allergic to fights? Back home, Senya tells him that Matakara has been possessed by Ichiya. Arajin then meets up with Shindo, and he's told that Senya wants to take over his body. At the same time, Ichiya finally deceived Matakara into giving in to his anger. Arajin still didn't understand what Shindo told him, and the four-eyed guy just told him to warn Matakara too as he walked out while laughing like a deranged maniac. Matakara finally shows up in the school the next day, and he goes to the arcade to have some fun with Zabu and Kamau. Some NG boys bump into him, and he wipes the floor with them. Zabu and Kamau then notice that there's something off with him. When Matakara leaves, he tries picking a fight with Marito, but even prey should know when it's in the presence of a predator. Marito just dodges all his attacks, and Matakara flees. Meanwhile, Arajin is still trying to get Senya to show himself, but the honky has refused. Arajin's mom hears him talking to himself and brings up the wrong assumptions again. This woman really needs a man in her life. Zabu tells Ken about how Matakara has been acting weird and picking fights with random guys. Ken requests that the boy be brought to him. Now that I look at it, Ken is an old 21-year-old who's still in high school and only communicates by writing on paper. Once again, I ask if there's any normal person in this show. Matakara meets Tatsuo and starts beating him, but Ichiya convinces him to become more ruthless about it. Jabashiri then gets into a fight with him, but Matakara leaves both him and his friend half dead. I thought honki were people who fought with honor, but it seems Ichiya missed his bus for that. Zabu and Kamau try to stop their friend from his rampage, but he just talks to them rudely. Suddenly, Marito announces to the school speakers that Matakara should come to the field. Hopefully, Marito can beat some sense and manners into him. Everyone heads out to watch their fight. Arajin remembers what Shindo told him and rushes out as well. Their fight starts, and Matakara seems to be holding his own at first. He soon gets the floor wiped with his butt, even after pulling a cheap trick by throwing dirt in Marito's face. At the last moment when it looked like it was over for him, he finally merged with Ichiya and sent Marito flying. Marito got beat to the point of not being able to move. Matakara continued with the cheap tricks and stomped on a downed opponent, which made Mahoro faint on the spot. Filled with frustration and anger, Arajin finally makes Senya appear to answer his questions. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content.